stepping inside a coffin, knowing it was designed to keep you alive. That was the idea behind the Iron Maiden. A cabinet shaped like a woman, made entirely of iron, lined on the inside with long iron spikes. The door closed, and the spikes drove into your body. Historians have studied it for centuries. Museums across Europe still display them, and the story spread everywhere. But here's what they don't tell you. There is not a single verified case of anyone ever being executed inside one. The Iron Maiden was almost certainly a myth, and yet the truth of what actually happened is far more disturbing, because the real executions of history didn't need theatrical props. They had something the Iron Maiden never had: an audience, crowds that gathered before dawn, vendors selling bread and wine, children sitting on their fathers' shoulders, waiting, not for a show, for a death. And the more it lasted, the louder they got. Tonight, 9 real executions from history, documented, verified, witnessed by thousands, so extreme that people didn't just watch them. They paid for the best seats. Before modern prisons, before surveillance cameras and criminal records, the state had one tool: fear. And fear only works if everyone can see it. Public execution wasn't about the person dying. It was about the 10,000 people watching. It was a message written in flesh. This is what happens. This is what the state can do to your body. Remember this: in medieval Europe, execution days were public holidays. Schools closed, markets paused, entire towns walked to the square. The execution wasn't hidden from children. It was considered educational, and the vendors never stopped selling food, wine, better positions in the crowd, because this was still considered normal. And across centuries and continents, 9 methods stood above the rest, not because they were the most effective, but because they were the most visible. Execution 1: hanging. For most of European history, this was the standard: a rope, a platform, a crowd. Done correctly, the neck snapped at the moment of the drop. Death came in seconds. But correctly was rare. More often, the drop was too short. The neck didn't break, and the condemned spent several minutes suspended, struggling. The crowd had a name for it. They called it the dance, and they leaned forward to watch it. In 18th century England, the family of the condemned was sometimes allowed to pull on the legs to accelerate death. That was considered an act of mercy. The crowd watched that too. But this was still considered humane. What came next was worse. Execution 2: burning at the stake. Fire was theological. The church taught that the flames didn't just kill the body. They purified the soul, destroyed the heresy at its root. But the process was not what most people imagine. The fire didn't rise all at once. It started at the feet and moved upward, slowly. The smoke came first, which could cause unconsciousness. That was considered fortunate. When Joan of Arc was burned in Rouen in 1431, the executioner later stated he felt deep regret. Not because he was ordered to kill her, but because the fire burned too slowly. The crowd stood in silence. Some wept, but most did not look away. And that method was still considered merciful. What came next? The crowd considered a spectacle. Execution de Camala 3, beheading. This was reserved for nobility. Considered the most merciful option. A clean death, instant, without degradation. But mercy depended entirely on the executioner's aim. When Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed in 1587, it took 3 strikes. The first missed. The second cut deep, but did not sever. The third completed it. The crowd that had gathered at Fotheringhay Castle held its breath through all 3, and then her lips continued moving for 15 seconds after the head was separated from the body. Witnesses recorded it. The crowd moved closer, to see better. And there was a method even more deliberate than this. One designed not to end life, but to extend suffering. Execution 4, breaking wheel. France used it until 1791. Germany kept it even longer. The condemned was tied to a large wooden wheel, spread-eagled, and then the executioner worked methodically, starting with the legs, moving to the arms, each bone broken individually, with a heavy iron-tipped hammer. The goal was not speed. The goal was that the person remain conscious through as many strikes as possible. In documented cases from the Paris archives, condemned men survived on the wheel for more than 6 hours. The vendors kept selling food as it happened. There was a mercy option, a single blow to the chest or throat, called the coup de grace, but it was only administered by order of the judge. Not every judge gave the order, and the crowd waited to find out which kind of judge this one was. But for those who betrayed a king, the wheel was not enough. Execution 5, drawn and quartered, reserved for those convicted of high treason against the English crown. The full sentence was specific. The condemned was dragged through the streets on a wooden hurdle. The crowd lined the roads to watch the procession, then hanged by the neck, but removed from the rope before death, then disemboweled, still alive. The intestines burned in front of them, then beheaded, then the body cut into 4 parts, sent to 4 corners of the kingdom, as a warning. The last person executed this way in England was David Tyree. In 1782, 20,000 people watched. They had come from surrounding towns. Some had walked for hours to get there in time. And there was a method that didn't require a blade at all, just heat and time. Execution 6, boiling alive. Henry VIII introduced it as a specific punishment for poisoners. The Acte for Poisoning, 1531. The first person executed under it was a cook named Richard Rose, accused of poisoning a household's food. He was lowered into a cauldron of water, heated slowly. Records from the time describe the crowd's reaction as unusual, not the excited noise typical of executions, but something quieter, more unsettled. Even people accustomed to public death looked at each other differently that day. Some moved closer because they had never seen anything like it. The law was repealed 9 years later. Even Henry VIII eventually decided it had gone too far. But there was a method that required no fire, no blade, no crowd, just a stake and patience. Execution 7, impalement. Vlad III of Wallachia used this method not as punishment, but as policy. Ottoman accounts from the 15th century describe arriving at the outskirts of his territory and seeing a forest, not of trees, of stakes, with between 20 and 30,000 bodies impaled at varying heights. The Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, a man not known for weakness, reportedly turned his army around. He said he could not fight a man capable of something like that. The method was engineered for duration. The stake angled to avoid vital organs for as long as possible. Some survived for days, and the wind carried the smell long before the bodies came into view. And travelers passed through those roads and kept walking, because there was nothing else to do. And then there was a method people never forgot, one that didn't even need a crowd to witness it, because the image alone was enough. Execution 8, flaying. The Assyrians documented it in stone. Carvings that still exist today in the British Museum. The removal of skin, methodically, while the person remained alive. It required skill. It was not fast, and it was not hidden. The Assyrian reliefs show the process in detail, carved into palace walls, so that every visitor, every ambassador, every potential enemy would see exactly what the empire was capable of. The skin was sometimes displayed afterward, stretched, mounted, as a monument, as a message, and people looked at it and understood. But of all the methods in history, there is one that people never forgot, not because they saw it, but because they imagined it. Execution 9, Scaphism. This is the one that stays with you. Only one ancient source describes it. Plutarch, writing in the 1st century AD, records what the Persians allegedly did to a man named Mithridates. The method: 2 boats fitted together like a shell. The person placed inside. Head, hands, and feet protruding from holes in the sides. Fed milk and honey until they developed severe internal decay. The mixture poured over their exposed skin, left on a stagnant pond. In the sun, the insects came and fed and bred inside the living body. Plutarch records that Mithridates survived 17 days. 17 days. And during those 17 days, people knew, people talked about it. People imagined what it felt like. And they kept telling the story for centuries. You are still hearing it now. Whether it happened exactly as Plutarch described, historians are not certain. But the fact that someone wrote it down in precise detail says something. Not just about the Persians, about us, about what humans remember, and why, today, we look at these executions and we ask the obvious question: how was this allowed? How did people stand in a crowd, watching a human body being destroyed, and call it justice? But there's a harder question underneath that one. Every society believes its punishments are proportional. Every era thinks its cruelties are necessary. The people in those crowds weren't monsters. They were farmers, merchants, mothers, children, people who woke up that morning, ate breakfast, and walked to the square because this was normal, because the state said it was right. And 1,000 years from now, what will they say about us? What do we accept today, without questioning, that future generations will find just as disturbing? The most disturbing part of history is not what people suffered. It's what everyone else was willing to watch. If this changed the way you see history, subscribe now, because the past is far darker than most people realize. And the next story might stay with you longer than you expect. And tell me this, be honest with yourself. If you were standing in that crowd, would you really have walked away? Or would you have stayed just a little longer?